Welcome to this short discussion on strategic foresight for 2024. Strategic foresight for 2024. The topic kind of explains itself, right? That we want to talk about 2024 and how to seize the initiative, how to not wait for 2024 to happen to us, but how we can happen to 2024, right? And shape it. Fantastic. Something interesting happened in the early days of COVID. I was reading and I read about how someone wrote a book on the 1918 pandemic. And while President Bush was on vacation at his ranch in 2005, he was given a pre-copy, right? A pre-launch copy of the book to read. President Bush was reading this book, The Great Influenza, about the 1918 pandemic. And something struck him from what the author said, that history had shown that a pandemic happens at about every 100 years. He became restless, got back to Washington, D.C., called a meeting, right, of his cabinet and some health experts on epidemics and so on. And he said, we cannot afford to be unprepared for the next pandemic. So they began to prepare. They laid out, they played the scenarios, laid out a detailed plan, what they would need, right? The masks, the oxygen tanks, and everything. And they actually budgeted for it and went ahead and prepared. They set up an office for it, hired experts, and bought massive equipment. Of course, for several years, nothing happened. The pandemic did not happen. By the time President Trump came into office, his own officials reviewed everything and saw that a good chunk of those things that had been bought had expired. So it was like, look, get rid of these items. But the response of the US government to a large extent was influenced and it was informed and influenced by the plans that had been made when President Bush raised the alarm and drew everybody's attention to the potential for a pandemic. This is the nature of strategic foresight, right? That we are sensitive to the future. And we realize that strategic foresight is not actually about the future, it's about today. It's about being sensitive to the changes that are coming in the future, both the ones that we can project from current known factors and the ones that we know are going to show up that are beyond the range of our thinking or imagination at the moment. But strategic foresight at the end of the day is about today. It's about the decisions that we are making today and the actions that we are taking today, right? There's a verse in the Bible from King Solomon, Proverbs 22 verse 3, that speaks to the heart of this matter. Proverbs 22 verse 3, the Passion Translation. It says, a prudent man with insight foresees danger coming and prepares himself for it. But the senseless rush blindly forward and suffer the consequences. A prudent man with insight foresees danger coming and prepares himself for it. But the senseless rush blindly forward and suffer the consequences. So we should not approach 2024 blindly, right? Early last year, 2022, a war broke out between Russia and Ukraine. Who saw that coming? This year, Hamas attacked Israel, and then it resulted in a war. Thousands and thousands of lives have been lost. I don't need to tell you about the number of businesses that have been destroyed in Gaza, right? Who saw that coming? So that's the big question about 2024, isn't it? What is coming in 2024? Where is the war going to break out? Whether events are going to have devastating effects on cities, on businesses. There was the fire in Hawaii, right? Scary. It destroyed businesses, destroyed people's homes, and so on. So the US military developed an acronym a little over 20 years ago, VUCA, V-U-C-A. And those 4 words, to a large extent, today influence the discussion on strategic foresight. The V stands for volatility. The U stands for uncertainty. The C stands for complexity. And the A stands for ambiguity. They are from the words volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The volatility has to do with the rate of change. What we've discovered is that, you've had this evolution in mankind's civilization, from the agrarian economy structure to industrialization, and then to technology, then information age, and so on. So what has been observed is that the time gap between dispensations is narrowing, whereas it took hundreds of years before there was a huge change, right? Especially in the way people communicate, because that's what changes everything. Once the way people communicate and connect changes, it changes everything else. Now, the time span between those massive changes are very close now. That is what is making things to be volatile, right? The uncertainty, has to do with the fact that the rate of knowledge change or increase in knowledge is changing very fast. So our knowledge is expiring very fast, right? And what you know is what you know. What you know is what you know, especially if you have been successful. You have applied certain strategies, applied certain methods, they worked for you. That's how you got to where you are. That gives us cognitive bias, right? So when you talk about potential solutions, you say, I know what I'm talking about, right? And truly, you know what you are talking about. Sadly, that thing that you know may actually not be able to solve the same problems that you solved yesterday. So it is called educated incapacity. Educated incapacity. We are incapable of solving problems because of the education that we had before. So they said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be the person that did not go to school. It's going to be the person that is not willing to unlearn, to relearn, right? Complexity. Complexity in itself may not be a problem because it's just natural. Whenever anything grows, it becomes more complex. You started your business, you were the only person there. Business grew, number of customers exploded, you hired 2 people, then they became 5, then they became 20. With the introduction of each person, you increase the complexity in your organization. You draw your organizational chart. With the introduction of new boxes, right? New roles, you are increasing complexity. So complexity comes naturally with growth. But then when we respond to the complexity, we introduce complications, right? So how do we respond to complications? When we apply strategic foresight, we are able to respond to complexity with simplicity, right? Because that's what geniuses do, right? They they manage complexity with simplicity. When geniuses innovate, you just find out they make the complex simple, right? So on my phone, just click and a whole lot of things happen. Now, the details of the back end, that's not my problem. Let the scientists and the technologists handle that. The important thing is when I press play, that I can watch the movie, right, on my phone. The ambiguity side takes care of the things we actually don't even know are coming, right? And there's a high level of that now. Like I said, you have the war between Russia and Ukraine. We didn't see that coming. Hamas, we didn't see that coming, right? Ambiguity. Some of the most successful governments and companies in the world right now actually employ futurists to help them explore the future. This is very important. So, if your economy is doing poorly, how do you compete for resources if you are not exploring the future before it arrives? Some people have crossed bridges that you don't even know exist yet. So, the Singapore government has a reputation for having futurists in the employment and preparing for the future. Shell Corporation has a huge reputation when it comes to futuring and strategic foresight, because they actually employed PhD holders to explore the future, and this was like in the 50s and 60s when, the oil and gas industry was just beginning to explode. They sensed that this was going to be a volatile industry, and they employed futurists. In fact, universities have had to borrow the curriculum, take the curriculum from Shell to teach a strategic foresight and futuring now. And with that, Shell has thrived well. Oil crisis of the early 70s, Shell thrived well, right? And some other upheavals, right, that in the process or in the years that have come since then. Strategic foresight enables us to think more comprehensively about the future. It's a rapidly changing world that we have now. We'll keep facing new challenges. There'll be new innovations coming that you don't even have an idea about now, that they are cooking in some lab. In response to the changes, in response to some of those innovations, government will have to make policies. Like you can see, government is running after the developments in AI right now, because they have to bring in regulations and ensure that some people don't eventually bury everybody else, right? So it's a rapidly changing world. Strategic foresight enables us to prepare for some of those challenges that are coming ahead, helps us to be able to withstand shocks that happen, because they will always happen. But strategic foresight helps us to withstand those shocks better and imagine trends. There will always be emerging trends, right? And some of them will connect. What Steve Jobs did, was to create that connection between technology and communication and then music. then the entertainment industry, and so on. So sometimes the trends collide. Strategic foresight at least helps us to be able to preempt some of those collisions ahead. I love the fact that strategic foresight gives us a systematic approach, right, for dealing with uncertainty. A systematic approach for dealing with uncertainty and for thinking about the future so that we can make better decisions in the present. And more importantly, so that we can better manage outcomes later, different outcomes, different possible outcomes. If this happens, how am I going to respond to it? How are we going to respond to it? What are the problems that it will create? What are the opportunities also that will come with it? What do we do when we discuss strategic foresight? We explore different futures. The average person thinks of only one set of assumed factors, right? In fact, most people plan on the assumption that things will continue the way they are. If you ask people to set goals for 2024 now, the average person will set it, average employee will set it on the assumption that they will still be holding their current job. Who says? Because some people may lose their jobs in January, some in February, some in March, right? So when we do strategic foresight, we explore different possible futures. We identify the risks that come with those futures. We also identify the opportunities that those potential futures will create. We identify the potential changes that might emerge. I heard that President Reagan had some experts explain to him the potential scenarios that could happen if there was a nuclear war. By the time they described the catastrophic possible outcomes, immediately he just initiated some high-wire diplomatic moves. And that was how he got to sign some peace deals with the Soviet Union. In other words, it's better we avoid the catastrophe altogether. Okay? So strategic foresight, we did something for some of our clients. That's in Samadhi GLC. We did something for some of our clients January 2020, right? Because what you then do is we have different models, for exploring the future through strategic foresight. We have different models. There's a particular one that we applied January 2020 for some of our clients, scenario planning. It's amazing. One of them was telling me that it was profoundly helpful. We did this session with the board of a large construction company. It's actually a construction group. They have different construction companies under them. And we had these 2 hours with the board. And I used my triangular framework that discusses first potential disruptions, and then at the other angle, the capacity of your system to manage those disruptions. And then the third point of the triangle is leadership, the role of leadership in preparing the organization for disruption and leveraging actually those disruptions to take the organization through a transformation process and to new levels of success. So this CEO, in fact, the founder actually of the group, said that exercise was a lifesaver, that it was fantastic. So he said it prepared them for the pandemic. I said, well, did we mention pandemic as one of the possible problems that could happen during the year? He said, well, we didn't use the word pandemic, but we used the word epidemic, right? He said, we considered the possibility of an epidemic. I said, wow, that is amazing, right? So This is just simply a call today to not wait for the new things, right? The potential challenges of 2024 to catch us unawares. That for the first time, we should approach 2024 with better intentionality. Strategic foresight will help us to build resilience. So whatever, changes may come to blindside our organizations or blindside us as individuals, I want us to have the resilience to withstand those shocks because they really are not surprises, because we've taken time to preempt the different possible challenges that may show up in the year. I want us to approach a strategic foresight approach to 2024 so that we can manage the shocks or surprises that will happen in 2024. It is inevitable. New things are going to happen. New challenges are going to show up. Where will war break out in the new year? There will be elections in the US in November 2024. Who's going to be the president? I don't know, right? But we can look at the possibilities. Strategic foresight is not predicting the future. It is just simply playing potential scenarios of what can happen and preparing ourselves to take advantage of the change that will happen. One major thing that strategic foresight will do, prepare us to manage or to adapt to evolving customer needs. Coming out of the pandemic, for example, human psyche changed. Human psychology changed. Some people are still not paying attention to that. People are not the same anymore. Right after, like in North America, right after the pandemic, as we were coming out of the pandemic, there was the great resignation. Many people resigned their jobs and moved on. Now, if you live in Africa, in Nigeria, for example, there's the great emigration, the Japa syndrome. Why? COVID changed people's values, or COVID probably didn't change them, but made people to evaluate their values, to do an evaluation, to rethink what was most important in life. Because until the vaccines showed up, we were facing something that made life, staying alive, the most important thing. More valuable, health became more valuable than money, because you saw very wealthy people that passed away. You saw very powerful people that passed away. Relationships became very important for some of us. Family became very important for some of us, because who was there to take care of you, right? When the problems landed. People who thought they could not do without going on vacation, you just found out this is not a matter for vacation now, right? I need to stay alive, right? But I'll tell you one thing, because our own bias here is leadership. People then realize whether their leaders really cared for them or not. That's it. Some leaders value power more than human life. Some value profit and money more than human life. The employees found it. So I'm just saying, we have evolving customer demands when changes happen like that. And there's the need for innovation. We want strategic foresight to drive the services and products that we innovate for 2024. Anyway, that brings me to this point. We need empathy. As we discuss strategic foresight, explore 2024, we need to turn on our power of empathy to the maximum, because we need to keep the focus on people and their needs. And there's need for a lot of collaboration, because we're dealing with uncertainty. I'll stop on this point. Have you watched the movie? Have you watched The Blackberry? I watched the movie The Blackberry. It's amazing. It's amazing. You need to watch it, because I'm going to watch it again and again. Okay. and we'll discuss it some more later. But one thing struck me. The moment the co-CEO of BlackBerry watched Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone and his response. So, it's just a blip on the radar. It's something that will fizzle out of the market very soon. The iPhone killed the BlackBerry. So what are some of those cues going on right now that actually have the potential to affect you, your career, your business, right, in 2024 that we're not paying attention to? When we get into the room, smart minds will be discussing some of these things together. 2024 can be the best year we've had until now. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are. Bye for now.